Hello everyone. For this last short video for the week, I want to talk about the advanced authentication methods. These are methods other than just simply typing in a username and password. So when you are using a tablet or a phone or some other device, it's not as easy necessarily just to log in with a username and password. Imagine typing out your username and password with your thumb on a phone, for example. So we have a couple of other ways that we can authenticate. So if we go to Settings, and in Settings, go to Accounts, there's an option for sign-in options. This gives us the different ways we can sign in. I'll talk about Windows Hello in just a moment. First, we have the normal password. This is what we're used to, where we have a username and we type in a password and we log in. We can add instead a PIN. A PIN is a personal identification number. You can, verify that's me. You can create a PIN, a series of numbers, and use that to log in. Specifically, if you're using a phone, many of us are already familiar with doing that. And if you're running Windows 10, this is where you would go to make that change. Now, the requirements for a personal identification number are they have to be at least 4 digits long. They can be more. And they can't be in a pattern, such as repeated numbers or increasing or decreasing numbers. So you come up with your series of numbers, enter it here, and then you can use that to log in instead of your password. Your password doesn't go away, but for authentication, for logging in, or for signing into applications or downloading things like that, you can just use a PIN instead of typing in your password. Now, picture password is something that's been around for a little while, and you've seen it on phones, and that is the idea of taking a picture. Let me authenticate again. Of taking a picture and then drawing some sort of pattern on the picture to log in that way. So let's choose a picture and see how that works. We'll grab this Maine Coon here. Okay, so drag the picture. Oh, this looks like a good position. You're allowed to move it around though if you've got somewhere in particular that you wanted. So let's keep his face here. There we go. We'll use that picture. And now we need 3 gestures, and we need to keep track of this because this is how we're going to log in. So like say for example, I wanted to circle his face, or basically outline his face. And so what I would do with those gestures, I would make one gesture that would come over this way. Yep. One gesture that would come down this way. You saw the arrows. And then one gesture that would go back up to his ear again. So those are the 3 gestures. So I would repeat them so it knows that I know what I'm doing. And so I can also recreate the area. There we go. So next time I wanted to sign in, I could use a picture to sign in. So let's give that a try. I log out, and let me try logging back in. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Sorry about that. Sign out. Okay, and then if I want to sign in as Phil again, I click on Phil. Hey, look at that. Kitty comes up. So now I need the 3 gestures that I remembered, hopefully, to sign in. So I remembered I went this way, then I went this way, then I went this way. And then I'm logged in. Okay, so using picture password is actually kind of a neat thing. It's also specifically for phones because it's all in your hand. You can simply draw some sort of pattern on a picture that you can remember to get logged in. Now getting back to the authentication, the sign-in options. Oops, and I did it again. Getting back to the sign-in options, there is that thing that I said I was going to talk about later called Windows Hello. Windows Hello isn't available on this device because I don't have any of the hardware needed. Windows Hello does biometrics. It does fingerprints or retina scans, facial recognition if I had a webcam attached. So what it will do is it will personalize the login based on who you are, as opposed to passwords are what you know, pins are what you know. Sometimes what you are or what you have can be used to sign in. So what you are would be something biometric. Well, if you had biometrics available, you'd be able to configure it. In other words, you'd be able to add your fingerprint or have it take a picture of your face and use that to sign in. This again is very useful for devices, but this is also useful for computers, for desktop computers if they have that hardware. So the last authentication method that I want to talk about is network authentication. So there are 2 different kinds of networks that they talk about in the book in this chapter, and that's peer-to-peer or domain-based networks. Now, the way they work, peer-to-peer networks are based on the fact that you have a bunch of computers that are all connected, but they're all independent machines. They don't have to authenticate to each other. You are authenticating to a specific machine. What that means is that your user, your local user on this computer, you would have to have an identical user on the other machines in order to access those machines, which is fine. You can do that. It's a little more work, but for a small office, that might not be a bad idea. Whereas if you had a larger office, you might want to think about using the domain idea. A domain network has a server, a machine, just some other computer somewhere else that handles all of the authentication. And so whenever you want to log into a computer, you don't log into your local computer. You actually connect to the server, type in your information. The server keeps track of all that information and then says whether or not you're able to get on your local machine, what access you have to different things. Most companies will have some sort of server integration at this point if they're of any decent size. I say decent size, really more than 5 or 10 users, and you really start having problems with peer-to-peer network authentication. So if you have network authentication, whether it's having the same user set up on multiple machines or having a domain where you have one server that handles the authentication, they both have an idea of cached credentials. A cache is basically something that you have set aside. It's an old French word that literally meant buried in the ground. So you would be able to, in World War I, where it became a popular term for us, was they would have caches of weapons where they would bury weapons in certain spots by trees or whatever, and then you would go dig them up when you happen to be in the area. And so we now use it to be something that just has where some pieces of information or of items are stored, and they're hidden away for later use. So cache credentials are stuff that gets stored on your computer and that can be used for later use. For example, if you were to have a laptop and you were at a domain system where you plug in or you connect to the Wi-Fi and you have to connect to the server and log in, and then you are able to get access to the network. If you leave and come back a lot, your laptop needs to remember this domain situation, what server it's talking to, and its authentication credentials and things like that. And so it does. It stores those cache credentials on your computer. So when you come back to the network after first connecting to it, it's much smoother because you have all the information stored on the laptop. So that's an example of cache credentials. So those are the different types of authentication that we are going to cover in this class. There's a couple of things they talk about in the book about smart cards and Microsoft Passport. Microsoft Passport, very briefly, is an online service that will store passwords for you. Essentially, you log into Passport, and then you can use Passport to then access any other online service. So you don't have to remember all of your passwords. You just put them in Passport and then say, I want to go to YouTube. I want to go to Amazon. And then Passport will then log you into those services. So you don't have to remember other passwords, and so you don't have to worry about the weakest link, whether it's your computer or someone else's website getting hacked. All of your other passwords, all of your other data is still safe because it's in Microsoft Passport, unless Microsoft Passport gets hacked. That is unlikely, though, because they do a lot of pretty good security. So that is it for this week. We've talked about this week users and groups, logging in, different kinds of authentication, user profiles, and how to create and modify users. So that's all. I hope you all have a good week, and please email me if you have any questions or concerns.